Marjorie and I was together. She used to hate. See, that's what I'm saying. I'm gonna tell it all. I'm telling it all, y'all. She said and it was fact. She used to check dudes with big lips. Yeah.
So,
but I do want people to know and understand that it's not about.
Just when you thought the Harvey household had finally locked their skeletons securely in the closet, the doors didn't just creak open. They were completely blown off the hinges. Steve Harvey is officially running out of places to hide, running out of favors to call in, and quite frankly, running out of professional public relations experts willing to clean up this absolute catastrophic mess. The standard, highly polished family image that Steve spent tens of millions of dollars building over decades has officially collapsed into a pile of ash, leaving the pristine comedian scrambling in absolute panic to salvage what is left of his multi-million-dollar empire. Why is the legendary king of comedy suddenly sweating through his custom-tailored designer suits on national television? Because Marjorie Harvey's notorious ex-husband, Jim Townsend, has finally broken his decades-long silence. And he is not just whispering minor secrets. He is screaming the kind of federal-level, jaw-dropping truths that make Hollywood power couples wish they had never stepped into the bright lights of fame. We are not talking about simple, everyday relationship drama or petty, post-divorce arguments here. We are talking about deep, dark, multi-layered allegations that stretch all the way back to the gritty streets of Memphis, involving undercover federal investigations, secret plea deals, millions in unaccounted cash, and a highly hidden lifestyle that completely contradicts the elegant, high-fashion persona Marjorie flaunts today on social media. The internet is in an absolute frenzy. Social media servers are practically melting down, and the millions of fans who trusted the Harvey brand are demanding to know the real story. Did Steve willingly marry into a web of chaos? Or is he just another pawn in a much bigger game? The absolute panic radiating from the Harvey camp right now is completely unprecedented. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear the collective screeching of tires as Steve's highly paid damage control team tries to pivot away from a looming public relations disaster. For years, the public was fed a beautifully curated, heavily sanitized fairy tale about how Steve and Marjorie reconnected later in life. Two mature adults finding true love after navigating their own separate, complicated paths. We were told stories of redemption, of a blended family coming together in perfect harmony, and of Steve saving the day like a knight in shining armor. But according to the explosive, newly uncovered claims making the rounds in the darkest corners of the internet, that entire narrative might just be the most expensive, elaborate script Hollywood has ever produced. Jim Townsend didn't just open a door to the past, he tore down the entire wall, exposing a chaotic landscape filled with federal indictments, street-level operations, and a persona that looks nothing like the high-fashion, runway-walking icon we see on Instagram today. The world wants to know how a girl from Memphis ended up running the most prominent households in Hollywood. And the answers coming out are turning stomachs and raising eyebrows across the entire entertainment industry. To understand the sheer magnitude of why Steve Harvey is currently losing his mind behind closed doors, you have to look back at the actual identity Marjorie carried long before she ever shared a luxury yacht with a global television host. To the average viewer who only watches Steve's daytime shows or follows Marjorie's impeccable wardrobe choices, she represents the pinnacle of elegance, sophistication, and upper-class luxury. But the streets of Memphis remember a completely different woman. A woman who allegedly earned the legendary, spine-chilling moniker of Lady Substances. This wasn't a nickname given to someone who just happened to attend a few wild parties or hang out with a rough crowd. According to street lore and leaked whispers, it was a title earned through sheer strategic positioning, absolute fearlessness, and an uncanny ability to navigate a highly dangerous, multi-million-dollar underworld. The contrast between that gritty reality and the pristine, diamond-studded life she leads today is so incredibly vast that it feels almost fictional. Yet the federal paperwork and the first-hand accounts tell a story that cannot be easily swept under an expensive rug. Jim Townsend was not just a casual observer in Marjorie's early life. He was the man right at the center of the storm, a high-rolling figure who eventually found himself squarely in the crosshairs of a massive federal investigation. When the DEA and the FBI finally closed in on his operation, they weren't just looking at him. They had their eyes on the entire circle, and right next to him in those surveillance reports was the future Mrs. Harvey, According to the wildest, most scandalous rumors currently exploding online, federal agents possessed concrete, undeniable footage and recorded wiretaps showing Marjorie actively participating in transactions that would easily carry a decades-long prison sentence. The tension in that room must have been absolutely suffocating when Townsend was confronted with the evidence, realizing that the mother of his children, who was heavily pregnant at the time, was facing the exact same grim future behind cold iron bars. It was at that exact moment that the ultimate sacrifice was allegedly made, a secret plea deal where Townsend agreed to take the absolute fall, absorbing a massive life sentence to ensure that Marjorie could walk away completely untouched by the law. But walking away from a federal investigation is one thing. Walking away from the people who protected you is a completely different story. The internet is currently dissecting the absolute coldness of how the transition went down, with anonymous sources claiming that while Townsend was sitting in a maximum security facility adjusting to a life behind bars, Marjorie was already planning her next major chess move. 5 years into his life sentence, the loyalty completely evaporated, the divorce papers were filed, and Marjorie vanished from the visiting room, leaving behind a man who believed he had traded his own freedom to secure hers. The public reaction to these specific details has been a mix of absolute horror and twisted fascination, with viewers pointing out that this established a chilling, highly calculated pattern of behavior that would define her entire romantic history. She didn't just survive the fallout of a major criminal empire. She allegedly used the freedom bought by another man's life sentence to completely reinvent herself, erasing the Memphis mud from her shoes and stepping directly into the upper echelons of high society. What makes this entire situation an absolute nightmare for Steve Harvey is the fact that his own career was built on the foundation of relatable, old-school family values, relationship advice, and moral integrity. Steve made hundreds of millions of dollars telling everyday people how to find love, how to behave in relationships, and how to spot a red flag from a mile away. Yet his own household is now being exposed as a potential minefield of secrets. The absolute irony is not lost on the public, and the internet is completely unmerciful when it comes to pointing out that the ultimate relationship guru might have been completely played by the ultimate player. If the rumors are true, Steve didn't just marry a beautiful woman. He willingly stepped into a pre-existing, highly volatile narrative, using his immense wealth, global platform, and powerful industry connections to help rewrite her history and bury the ghosts of Memphis once and for all. But as any Hollywood fixer will tell you, when you try to bury a skeleton that deeply, you better make sure the ex-husband doesn't get a presidential pardon and a microphone. The timing of Jim Townsend's sudden re-emergence couldn't possibly be worse for the Harvey empire, coming at a time when traditional television ratings are shifting and Steve is working harder than ever to secure his legacy across multiple global networks. For years, the story was safe because Townsend was supposed to stay in prison forever, serving a life sentence that guaranteed his silence until the end of his days. But when former President Barack Obama granted him clemency in 2017, the entire chessboard was violently flipped upside down, throwing the Harvey family into a quiet, desperate panic that has been boiling beneath the surface for nearly a decade. The moment Townsend stepped foot outside those prison walls as a free man, the expiration date on Marjorie's carefully crafted secrets was officially set, and we are now witnessing the absolute detonation of that social time bomb. It didn't happen overnight, but rather through a slow, calculated buildup of private conversations, independent media interviews, and whispers that finally reached a tipping point that no amount of money could suppress. As the internet continues to piece together this massive, multi-decade puzzle, the focus has shifted heavily onto the mid-2000s, the precise era when Steve and Marjorie officially tied the knot and began their joint takeover of the entertainment world. According to leaked industry insider reports that are currently spreading like wildfire, Steve's management team at the time was completely terrified of Marjorie's background, explicitly warning the comedian that associating with her could permanently damage his corporate sponsorships and family-friendly appeal. There are even rumors of a highly confidential, incredibly strict prenuptial agreement, and an accompanying non-disclosure agreement designed to keep any mention of her past relationships completely out of the press. But those corporate barriers only work against mainstream journalists, offering absolutely zero protection when a forgotten ex-husband decides to take his story directly to the alternative media landscape where the public decides what is real. The sheer volume of online commentary surrounding this scandal is growing by the second, with millions of viewers re-watching old clips of Steve and Marjorie's public appearances through a completely new, deeply suspicious lens. People are noticing the subtle tension, the forced smiles, and the way Steve always seemed overprotective whenever the media asked deep questions about their early years together. The general consensus among the online detective community is that Steve has been fighting a losing battle against the truth for over 15 years, pouring endless resources into keeping Marjorie's image as clean and wealthy as humanly possible to protect his own commercial viability. Every single luxury vacation, every single multi-million-dollar diamond ring, and every single front-row appearance at Paris Fashion Week is now being viewed not as genuine wealth, but as an aggressive, highly calculated distraction tactic designed to keep the world looking at the glitz instead of the grit. But the distractions are no longer working, and the narrative has completely broken free from Steve's iron grip, leaving his public relations team scrambling in a way that suggests they know the worst is yet to come. The rumor mill is currently teasing the existence of an unedited, incredibly raw tell-all manuscript that Townsend has allegedly been shopping around to major publishing houses and independent digital platforms, a document that supposedly contains exact dates, specific names, and details about missing funds that were never recovered by federal authorities. If this manuscript actually sees the light of day, it won't just be a localized celebrity gossip story. It could potentially trigger a renewed look into old financial records, forcing the public to confront the reality of where the foundation of this luxury lifestyle actually originated. Steve is reportedly working behind the scenes, using every ounce of his substantial industry leverage to block the publication. But in the modern digital age, once information wants to be free, a corporate blockade is about as useful as a paper umbrella in a Category 5 hurricane. As the first chapter of this unfolding disaster comes to a close, the spotlight remains firmly fixed on the absolute silence coming from the Harvey social media accounts, a silence that speaks volumes to anyone who understands how the Hollywood machine operates. Normally, Marjorie is incredibly quick to post a classy, subtly sarcastic response to any minor criticism, showcasing her luxury lifestyle as the ultimate shield against the haters. But this time, the silence is deafening, proving that the allegations brought forward by her ex-husband aren't just minor internet rumors that can be laughed off over a glass of expensive champagne. The Harvey empire is officially on life support, the public is completely hooked on every single new detail, and the underlying tension is building to a crescendo that promises to reshape everything we thought we knew about Steve, Marjorie, and the absolute price of Hollywood survival. The deafening silence from the Harvey mansion has only added fuel to an already raging inferno, and the internet has completely moved past the point of asking polite questions. We are now in the middle of a full-blown digital autopsy of Marjorie's past, and the findings are becoming more terrifying by the hour for Steve's high-priced legal team. Where did the money go when the Memphis empire crumbled? And how exactly did a woman with a frozen background suddenly re-emerge in the upper echelons of society, with enough capital to catch the eye of a literal king of comedy? The transition between being the wife of a man serving a life sentence to becoming the undisputed queen of high-end fashion is a gap so massive that it requires an incredible amount of heavy lifting, both financially and socially. According to anonymous sources claiming to have ties to the old Memphis circle, the federal government didn't even scratch the surface of the hidden assets, leaving behind a trail of breadcrumbs that internet detectives are now greedily picking up. What makes this second phase of the scandal so incredibly damaging is the sudden emergence of alleged leaked audio clips and old court depositions that are circulating on private forums. These documents suggest that the federal authorities were deeply frustrated with how the 1990s investigation concluded, feeling that the real mastermind had slipped through their fingers while Townsend took the fall. The internet is currently losing its collective mind over the theory that Marjorie didn't just escape the law, but that she actively outmaneuvered the finest investigators the government had to offer. This has completely shifted public perception from viewing her as a simple celebrity wife to looking at her as a high-level strategic operator who plays the game of life at a level most people can't even comprehend. For Steve, This shift in public perception is an absolute nightmare because his entire brand is centered around being the wise, experienced patriarch who knows how to handle every situation. Yet he appears completely outmatched by his own wife's history. The public reactions under every single entertainment news video are reaching a level of sarcasm and mockery that is practically artful. Commenters are openly joking that Steve needs to host a special episode of his talk show, just to interview his own wife about her alleged past life as a street legend. Others are pointing out the absolute hypocrisy of Steve's famous relationship books, suggesting that he should write a new chapter titled How to Completely Ignore a Multi-State Federal Investigation Folder while falling in love. The humor is sharp, it is relentless, and it is completely eroding the dignity of the Harvey name with every 1,000 shares it receives. The memes alone are a corporate disaster, with photos of Steve looking utterly confused being paired with captions detailing Marjorie's alleged street moniker, ensuring that the scandal stays fresh in the minds of younger audiences who don't even watch traditional television. But beneath the internet humor lies a much darker, highly illegal undercurrent of allegations regarding how the family's wealth has been managed since Steve and Marjorie tied the knot. Rumors are swirling that a prominent financial whistleblower has recently approached an independent media outlet with a chest full of banking records from the early 2000s. These alleged records supposedly show a series of highly complex international wire transfers that took place right around the time Steve's career hit superstardom, leading to wild speculation that old, unaccounted funds were being systematically cleaned through legitimate Hollywood production companies. While these claims remain completely unverified, the mere mention of financial irregularities has sent shockwaves through Steve's corporate sponsors, who are notoriously terrified of anything resembling money laundering or federal tax evasion. Major network executives are reportedly holding emergency conference calls to discuss the future of Steve's syndication deals, proving that the corporate panic is very real and moving fast. To add even more chaos to this absolute circus, a new figure has entered the chat, claiming to be a former close associate of Darnell Woods, Marjorie's second husband, who also happened to find himself in massive legal trouble. This anonymous source has been dropping absolute bombshells on social media spaces, alleging that Marjorie possessed a very specific playbook for dealing with powerful men who were facing prison time. The narrative being painted is one of absolute survival and calculated detachment, where men are treated as stepping stones to greater wealth and security, only to be completely cut off the moment their legal liabilities threaten her social standing. If these allegations hold any weight, it means that Jim Townsend wasn't an isolated incident, but rather the first chapter in a recurring series of strategic moves that eventually led to the ultimate prize, which was Steve Harvey's bank account and global prestige. The psychological toll this must be taking on Steve is becoming visible to those who study his recent public appearances and broadcasting clips. Industry insiders note that during recent tapings of his popular game shows, the usually energetic and quick-witted comedian seemed unusually distracted, occasionally fumbling his lines and failing to connect with the audience with his signature enthusiasm. There are whispers from the studio set that Steve has been spending his break times locked in his private dressing room, furiously arguing on the phone with his crisis managers and legal advisors. The pressure of maintaining a smiling, joyful face for millions of television viewers while your entire personal life is being ripped apart by a vengeful ex-husband online is a level of stress that would break even the strongest Hollywood veteran. The public can see the cracks forming in the armor, and the predatory alternative media landscape is circling like vultures, waiting for the exact moment the comedy icon finally snaps under the weight of the controversy. What makes the internet community so utterly relentless in their pursuit of this story is the total lack of accountability or genuine explanation from anyone inside the Harvey inner circle. Instead of addressing the elephant in the room, Marjorie's social media team recently posted a tone-deaf video showcasing her walking down a lavish hallway draped in thousands of dollars of rare furs and diamonds, completely ignoring the thousands of comments asking about Jim Townsend. This move backfired catastrophically, with the public interpreting the post as a blatant display of arrogance, and an attempt to flex her immense wealth in the faces of those demanding answers. The comment section under that specific video turned into an absolute war zone, with users writing things like "furs bought with silence money," and "look at the Queen of Memphis enjoying her retirement from the game." The disconnect between their PR strategy and the reality of public anger, is so wide that it feels like the Harveys are living in a completely different reality. As the narrative continues to spin out of control, independent investigators are starting to look into the legalities of Steve's adoption of Marjorie's children, a move that Jim Townsend has publicly condemned as the ultimate destruction of his family dynamic. Legal experts online are dissecting old family court filings, questioning whether Townsend's parental rights were properly terminated or if his status as a federal inmate was exploited to push the adoption through without his full, uncoerced consent. If any irregularities are discovered in those decades-old family court documents, it could open up a massive legal vulnerability for Steve, potentially exposing him to a highly publicized and incredibly messy civil lawsuit from a man who feels his entire legacy was stolen by a wealthy celebrity. The internet is practically begging for this legal showdown to happen, viewing it as the ultimate battle between a forgotten man from the streets and a wealthy Hollywood elite who thought money could buy a clean history. The narrative has now reached a point where anonymous, self-proclaimed hackers are claiming to have breached a private cloud server belonging to a high-ranking Hollywood fixer who worked extensively with Steve during the mid-2000s. These alleged hackers are teasing the release of a massive data dump code named the Harvey Files, which they claim contains private emails, text messages, and voice notes detailing exactly how much Steve knew about Marjorie's past before he agreed to marry her. The anticipation for this alleged leak is driving internet traffic to unprecedented levels, with forums experiencing temporary crashes as thousands of people gather to wait for the countdown to end. Whether the leak is real or just a highly sophisticated digital hoax, the sheer amount of attention it is generating proves that the public's appetite for this scandal is completely insatiable. Steve's pristine public image, which was once considered completely bulletproof, has now become a massive corporate liability that threatens to drag down every single brand associated with him. Companies that have spent years using Steve as the face of their marketing campaigns are quietly erasing his image from their current promotional materials, opting to distance themselves before the next major wave of allegations hits the press. The financial fallout from these quiet cancellations could easily reach into the tens of millions of dollars, hitting Steve exactly where it hurts the most. The ultimate irony of the situation is that the very thing Marjorie supposedly pursued, which was absolute financial security and high society status, is now the exact thing that is destroying the legacy of the man who gave it to her. The tension is building to an absolute breaking point as we move closer to learning what Jim Townsend's next public move will be. Rumors are circulating that he has recently signed a massive deal with a major independent streaming network for a multi-part docuseries that will lay out every single detail of his relationship with Marjorie, complete with never-before-seen photos, letters from prison, and testimonies from old Memphis associates. If this docuseries officially gets greenlit for release, it will be the absolute final nail in the coffin for the Harvey family's narrative control, forcing them to either enter a highly destructive public legal battle or watch their entire empire dissolve in real time before a global audience. The stage is officially set for an absolute execution of a Hollywood reputation, and as this second chapter closes, the world is holding its breath, waiting to see if Steve Harvey will survive the upcoming digital onslaught, or if the lady from Memphis will finally bring the entire house down. The corporate boardroom doors at the major networks are officially locked, and the atmosphere inside is reportedly thick with absolute dread. Steve Harvey's ultimate nightmare is no longer a looming threat on the digital horizon. It is actively landing on his doorstep with the force of a legal sledgehammer. Rumors are circulating that the federal government is quietly reviewing the old 1990s files to cross-reference them with recent financial disclosures from Steve's media companies. The internet is having an absolute field day with the idea that the Internal Revenue Service and federal prosecutors might be looking into how a multi-millionaire television host managed to absorb the complex financial cleanup of a past street operation. If these hypothetical probes gain any formal traction, we are looking at a financial crisis that could completely freeze the Harvey family's assets, bringing an abrupt and violent halt to the private jets, the European yacht excursions, and the endless shopping sprees at elite Parisian boutiques. The public backlash has officially transitioned from snarky comment sections to a coordinated corporate boycott that is making Steve's network executives absolutely sick. Activist groups and digital watchdogs are launching massive online campaigns demanding that corporate sponsors instantly pull their advertising dollars from any program bearing the Harvey name. The phrase "control the narrative" has become a mocking slogan across social media, with users creating viral videos analyzing every time Steve used his platform to lecture everyday people on honesty, while his own household was allegedly built on a foundation of monumental secrets. The anticipation of a sudden, forced retirement or a shocking resignation from his legendary hosting gigs is reaching a fever pitch, with industry insiders whispering that a massive network replacement strategy is already being drafted behind closed doors, just in case the worst-case scenario materializes. What is truly sending shockwaves through the entertainment industry is the rumor that several high-ranking production assistants have allegedly leaked internal emails detailing a massive internal panic at Steve's corporate headquarters. These alleged documents describe a chaotic scene where lawyers are desperately trying to renegotiate morality clauses in Steve's current contracts to prevent total financial ruin if more explosive details drop. The public is eating up every single piece of this unfolding drama, viewing the corporate scrambling as absolute proof that the family's polished image was nothing more than an incredibly fragile illusion. The general consensus online is that the ultimate relationship guru has finally run out of advice to give, trapped in a real-life controversy that cannot be solved by a witty punchline or an expressive stare at a game show camera. To make matters even more terrifying for the Harvey camp, independent media outlets are reporting that a highly respected investigative journalist has just secured a massive vault of unreleased recorded conversations from the old Memphis case. These audio tapes supposedly feature voice notes from individuals who were deeply embedded in the lifestyle Marjorie allegedly left behind, providing granular detail about how the entire operation functioned before the feds brought the hammer down. The internet community is practically vibrating with excitement, waiting for these tapes to drop on alternative streaming platforms where Hollywood censorship has absolutely no power. Every single attempt by Steve's legal army to issue cease and desist letters is only serving to make the public more curious, driving the traffic to alternative news sites to unprecedented heights, and proving that the corporate blockade has completely failed. The narrative has now spiraled so far out of control that even mainstream entertainment news outlets, which normally protect massive stars like Steve, are being forced to cover the growing digital mutiny. The sheer volume of public demand for answers has made it impossible for traditional media to ignore the elephant in the room, creating a situation where Steve is facing aggressive scrutiny from all sides. Analysts are openly predicting that this could be the single greatest reputational collapse in modern pop culture history, eclipsing previous Hollywood scandals due to the sheer level of hypocrisy involved. The public is refusing to let the story go, creating a massive digital archive of every allegation, every court document, and every old interview to ensure that the truth cannot be systematically erased from the internet's memory bank. As the financial pressure continues to mount, rumors are exploding that Marjorie's legal team is quietly preparing for a massive internal shift, with some speculative reports suggesting that a strategic separation might be on the table to protect whatever personal wealth can be legally salvaged. The internet is reacting to these rumors with a massive wave of sarcasm, pointing out that history might be repeating itself in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. Viewers are openly predicting that just like she allegedly did with her previous husbands when the legal walls started closing in, Marjorie might be getting ready to drop the comedy icon to ensure her own survival in the high fashion world. This theory has set social media completely on fire, with users creating elaborate timelines showing a perceived pattern of calculated departures whenever a partner's liabilities begin to outweigh their assets. The absolute desperation of the situation is reflected in the wild rumors surrounding a multi-million-dollar hush money offer that was allegedly made to Jim Townsend's camp to stop the upcoming docuseries from hitting the airwaves. According to these unverified whispers, the offer was flatly rejected, with Townsend completely determined to lay out his entire truth before a global audience regardless of the financial incentives offered to keep him quiet. This development has turned the entire situation into a real-life psychological thriller for the public, who are watching a forgotten man from the streets completely dismantle a multi-million-dollar Hollywood empire through the sheer power of his voice. The power dynamic has completely flipped, leaving the wealthy television host completely powerless against a man who has absolutely nothing left to lose. The public backlash is also deeply affecting the younger generation of the Harvey family, with social media users flooding the comment sections of Marjorie's children, questioning the legitimacy of their lavish lifestyles and their adopted status. The internet is completely unmerciful, demanding to know if the children feel any sense of accountability for the man who sat in a federal penitentiary while they were being raised in luxury by a global celebrity. This specific angle of the scandal has added a deeply emotional and highly volatile element to the public debate, turning the controversy into a massive conversation about family loyalty, stolen legacies, and the absolute price of fame. The family's attempts to block comments and restrict access to their profiles have only intensified the public's belief that they are hiding from a truth that is too painful to confront. As we reach the final crescendo of this massive investigative deep dive, the corporate sponsorships are continuing to evaporate into thin air, leaving Steve's financial future looking incredibly bleak. Major lifestyle brands, clothing lines, and international business ventures that once proudly displayed Steve's face are quietly removing him from their websites, desperate to avoid the massive consumer backlash that is actively destroying his name. The economic fallout from this scandal is moving at a speed that is completely terrifying for Hollywood insiders, proving that in the modern digital age, a carefully constructed reputation can be completely demolished in a matter of weeks if the public decides that the foundation was built on a lie. Steve Harvey's empire is officially on life support, the digital wolves are at the gate, and the absolute collapse of his legacy appears to be completely unavoidable. The ultimate irony of this entire situation is that the very platform Steve used to build his monumental wealth is now the exact tool being used to systematically tear his life apart. The internet has created a permanent, uncurated courtroom where the public acts as the jury, the ex-husband acts as the primary witness, and Steve is left without a single defense strategy that can save his brand from total destruction. The story of the lady from Memphis and the king of comedy has officially reached its final, most destructive chapter, leaving the world to marvel at how quickly a Hollywood fairy tale can turn into an absolute corporate nightmare when the ghosts of the past finally decide to stand up and speak the absolute truth. This is the absolute endgame for the Harvey family narrative, and the polished Hollywood illusion has officially left the building. Steve Harvey is running out of time, running out of strategies, and running out of ways to spin a story that has completely broken free from his multi-million-dollar corporate cage. The ghosts of Memphis have officially arrived on the red carpet, and the entire entertainment world is watching to see exactly how this colossal reputation collapse finishes playing out. Now, it is your turn to weigh in on this absolute digital showdown. Do you believe Steve Harvey was completely blind to Marjorie's alleged past? Or did he willingly use his massive wealth and industry power to bury a federal-level story? Is Jim Townsend finally getting his long-awaited justice? Or is this just a masterfully calculated move to dismantle a Hollywood empire? Drop your thoughts, your theories, and your absolute best analysis in the comments below, because the internet community is rewriting the rules of celebrity accountability in real time. If this deep dive into undercover investigations, hidden plea deals, and massive corporate panic kept you glued to your screen, you know exactly what to do. Hit that like button right now to support independent reporting that refuses to be silenced by Hollywood fixers. Share this video across every single platform to keep the conversation burning. And subscribe to the channel with notifications turned all the way on. Stay tuned, stay skeptical, and we will see you on the very next absolute exposure of the truth.